Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. And I'm going to start off with the winds aloft here, because at the end of the segment here, I kind of rushed through them pretty quick, so I thought I'd go over them a little longer here at the beginning. Anyway, for the 3,000-foot winds for tomorrow, pretty strong with a strong storm coming up. I've got 35 to 45 knot winds coming in toward the eastern North Gulf Coast, and 35 across the Panhandle, lighter toward the Queen Charlottes. Good east-northeasterlies here in the north-central interior, 25 to 35 knots, diminishing with this trough out here. And then the winds out over the Aleutians not too strong. Strongest wind field actually south of this low center and the associated weakening front. Looking at 9,000 feet with that strong center coming up here, really strong winds coming up into the North Gulf Coast or Gulf of Alaska, especially to the east, with the low center tracking up by tomorrow afternoon. At this elevation, about, well, actually, even at the surface, toward western Prince William Sound, kind of pulling back to the northwest. You can see winds up to 60 knots and 50 knots in across the Panhandle, diminishing to 30 toward Dixon Entrance. 25 to 35 knot northeasterlies through the interior there, diminishing toward the southwest coast. And again, lighter winds out here over the Aleutians. Turbulence-wise, just maybe a little bit of light, isolated, moderate chop possible there for Adak and maybe moving into Atka, but that front really weakening. The heavy stuff's going to be here coming up to the North Gulf Coast with considerable moderate here from Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, up along the North Gulf Coast. Behind the front, pretty unstable air mass, so thunderstorms breaking out, possibly northern Panhandle back toward Cape Yakataga. Another area with those gusty interior winds below 5,000 feet could be pretty moderate, considerable moderate here from Osage Eagle back across just the White Mountains in toward the maybe northern Kuskokwim Valley. Now, moving on to hazardous weather graphic, there's a high wind warning out for tomorrow for the Yakutat area from Cape Suckling to Cape Fairweather, and that's for winds increasing with that storm coming up, gusts 65 miles an hour, with the strongest winds occurring in the late morning hours just ahead of the front, and then it'll pass and should slowly diminish in the afternoon. Satellite imagery showing system here off the southwest coast, and then a huge mass of clouds coming up to the north here, mostly the high stuff, and actually this system building a ridge up, so it's some pretty gusty winds through Turnagain Arm, as high as 50 miles an hour in gusts during the afternoon. At McHugh Creek, a break here in the southwest interior. One trough bringing some rain up into the North Gulf Coast, that tapering off this afternoon. Generally just a cloudy day, mid and high level clouds on the increase of the Panhandle. And out west, pretty good northerly winds with the gradient, again, due to this system here. So we had the east-southeasterlies, again up to 50 miles an hour through Turnagain Arm, and then northerlies from the Bering Strait, anywhere gusts 35, maybe some areas had 40-mile-per-hour wind gusts like Nikolsky down here, but that extended from the Bering Strait, Tin City, across St. Lawrence Island, Gamble, across the Pribilos, mostly 30 to 35 miles an hour on those gusts, although Nikolsky did have a gust of 41 miles an hour. Winds diminishing now over the eastern Aleutians, and about 25 to 30 for those winds for the Alaska Peninsula, some isolated showers along this band, and areas of light rain showers along the southwest coast. Farther to the north, an area of light snow along the central Arctic coast. And then this system pushing in earlier this morning, mid-morning before the front passed, Shimmy had gusts to about 45 miles or 50 miles an hour, but just high clouds, or clouds now reaching Adak, no precipitation yet, at least at 3 p.m. this afternoon. The wind's still pretty light, under 10 knots. Moving on, rolling this through again, you can see this is showing signs of weakening, and it's going to weaken considerably here, especially in comparison to the stronger storm here coming up from the south. And you can see a little bit of a break now showing up, those showers lifting north and back to the northwest a little bit and diminishing. And we'll see on the chart today that actually due this area here to a trough swinging up well in advance of the main low center farther to the south. Rainfall and showers, North Gulf Coast areas, anywhere from rainfall amounts range from about 4/10 of an inch at Seward. Valdez picked up about 2/10 of an inch of precipitation. Western Prince William Sound anywhere closer to an inch of rain. And otherwise lighter amounts by far, only 700s at Cordova. And that all tapering off this afternoon. Some scattered showers along the Alaska Peninsula out in this area here with about 1/4 of an inch of precipitation falling during the day today at Togiak and Cape Newenham. Otherwise, the remainder of the amounts are quite light. Pretty light precipitation up to the north. And narrow ridge of high pressure here, and this low, enough of a gradient to keep those gusty winds up, as I mentioned, and that next front pushing in out to the west, already weakening, and that'll continue to do so tonight. Maybe small craft advisories now. I don't think there'll be gale force winds with this for the central Aleutians with rain and fog coming in. Another trough swinging some more action in towards Shimia, and this ridge really getting pinched off now. This low weakening just south of Nunivak Island. Keep a chance of moisture there from along the southwest coast, was Yukon Delta, especially Nunivak Island. Isolated showers back toward the Bering Strait. Dry over the interior here, but wind and rain trending toward heavy on both occasions there. Coming up toward the North Gulf Coast with this low center 972 millibars, and the winds definitely increasing gale force toward morning, and rain becoming heavy at times and pushing northward, trying to get to northern Cook Inlet by tomorrow morning, maybe more likely, definitely western Prince William Sound. And then by the afternoon, that tracks right up in toward western Prince William Sound. The low center continues to deepen, 969 millibars, and the front pushing inland across late in the morning here across the North Gulf Coast and eventually across southern southeast coast. So rain heavy at times starts to diminish with thunderstorms breaking out, possibly here along the North Gulf Coast. Unstable air swinging in around, another trough back to the southwest. So rain extending well off the coast yet. Moisture spreading northward into the central interior in the form of rain or snow, depending on your elevation, time of day. And up along the Arctic coast, north slope, periods of light snow, fog across much of that area. Some breaks here, northeast winds for the northwest coast, Kotzebue, Kivalina area back in possibly towards Selawik, and the Seward Peninsula basically dry. Out to the west, isolated showers at low really weakening now, just really not much left to it at all. Maybe some showers along the Alaska Peninsula. This front really weakening as well, continuing to really wash out here as it tries to push east of Atka, with just some very light precipitation there. Wind not a factor at all with this system. Again, the strongest wind field south of the Aleutians there with the low center just northwest of Kiska Island. Taking a look at the first day of the week, and we'll see this low tracks northward overnight and weakens considerably here as it moves northward by afternoon. Saturday up here in the southern upper Yukon Valley there, maybe close to Beaver at 1,002 millibars. We'll carry some moisture in the form of snow up to the Yukon River there, Porcupine River up to the Arctic Village area. Otherwise flurries, fog, Arctic coast. Not too widespread though, not really all that bad. And again, some sun possible or breaks in the overcast here for the northwest coast. Seward Peninsula, Kobuk Valley areas, dry over the southwest interior, and maybe some isolated showers along the southwest coast, and a couple of troughs bring showers, but again, much lighter weather coming up for Saturday, and what you see late tonight and through tomorrow afternoon. Next storm coming northward here, but farther to the west. So that's going to bear down more on Kodiak Island, eventually the Kenai Peninsula areas with rain on the increase in the late afternoon, definitely moderate to possibly heavy for Kodiak. Gale force winds with the system as well, but not really affecting southern Alaska until Saturday night. Otherwise, back to the west, we got a low tracking eastward here, just southwest of Nikolsky with most of the moisture and wind back to the west, winds on the Aleutians behind it. Not really all that strong, probably 20 to gusts 35 miles an hour, scattered showers. That same pattern pretty well holds for the entire western Bering here, drying out towards St. Lawrence Island. And for the lows, forecast lows for tonight, anywhere from the upper teens to lower 20s here through the eastern interior, upper 20s in the greater Tanana Valley area, and then mid to upper 30s, or really mid 30s here over the southwest coast, or near 40 right along the outer coastline, into lower 40s for the northeast Bristol Bay area. Upper 30s, lower 40s, south central Alaska, right around 40 Kodiak Island and Homer, as well as Unalaska. Lower to mid 40s for the central and western Aleutians, mid to upper 30s for Pribilofs on up to St. Lawrence Island. Southeast coast, lows in the 40s, lower 40s north to upper 40s along the coast and in the south, with Copper River Basin, eastern northeast areas probably dropping into the 20s. And then your highs for tomorrow, shaping up like this: 45 to 50 south central Alaska, lower 50s northeast Bristol Bay, and for same thing for Kodiak Island, 50 to 55 there for the Panhandle, a little cooler towards Skagway. Mid to upper 20s eastern Beaufort Sea coastline, upper 20s for the Brooks Range, eastern North Slope back to the western coast, upper 30s there for Kotzebue. Otherwise, Seward Peninsula mostly in the lower 40s. Same thing for St. Lawrence Island, mid 40s Pribilofs, mid 40s southwest coast, and near 50 tomorrow afternoon for Bristol Bay. Maybe this is Sitna Valley, lower 50s for Kodiak, mid to upper 40s for the Aleutians. Following morning, low temperatures. Saturday morning, first day of the weekend, mid 20s here over the eastern interior areas, 40-mile country, Tok, Northway, down in northeast Nabezna, up into Fort Yukon area, and then teens, a little cooler there, a little chillier for the Arctic Village, Anatuvik area, lower 20s, eastern Arctic coast, lower to mid here on the west side, and then kicking up to around freezing there for Point Hope, lower to mid 30s, Seward Peninsula, Kotzebue Sound, near 40 again, but probably upper 30s there for the southwest coast. No change for the Aleutians, lows in the 40s for the Panhandle, highs for the afternoon, upper 40s to lower 50s here for the southeast coast, 20s in the north, 45 to 50 southern Alaska, and mid 40s out over the Aleutians.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to aviation, the significant weather charts here. IFR, Seward Peninsula, eastward up across the northern half of the upper Yukon Valley, more or less there, and another band up across the north slope to the central eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, swath of VFR here to the south, but conditions deteriorating with moisture streaming northward later tonight and into early tomorrow morning on the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. More widespread IFR occurring with an initial surge of moisture coming up into the coast range here, Wrangell Mountains, Copper River Basin, right up into the 40-mile country. Marginal for the Aleutians, Bering Sea. Actually, VFR for the Fox Islands to start, and the band IFR off the southeast coast. That more or less dissipates tomorrow afternoon, with it moving through actually by tomorrow afternoon. So you can see some improvement to VFR, about Sitgone down across Prince of Wales Island to Heidelberg, persistent IFR up to the north, persisting here across the North Gulf Coast into the Wrangell Mountains to the Talkeetnas, becoming VFR Cook Inlet. IFR in marginal conditions, Alaska Range, northern Kuskokwim Valley, central Tanana Valley, mid-Tanana Valley looks marginal VFR, IFR from the White Mountains on up toward the east side. Arctic coast, north slope, especially the eastern areas there look pretty IFR, VFR breaking out here over the southwest. And then that'll be replaced with IFR for Saturday morning here for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, right up the Kuskokwim Valley there into the western Alaska Range and along the northern Alaska Range up to possibly as far north as Tanana, definitely for Denali Park. 40-mile country VFR, some VFR back to the northwest, IFR north slopes, central eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and marginal to maybe some areas of VFR for the Panhandle. In the afternoon, IFR over toward the eastern border for the southeast coast, otherwise marginal VFR, some lingering IFR up along the coast range, and marginal south central Alaska into the Bering Sea. All the Aleutians marginal, St. Lawrence Island, VFR, Norton Sound, much of the Seward Peninsula, Kobuk, Noatak, Selawik Valleys, Kivlina, Kotzebue look VFR on Saturday afternoon. IFR, central and east side, north slope in the Arctic coast, as well as the Brooks Range into the upper Yukon Valley. And for passes, Anatuvik, marginal VFR at times, but I think Adigan will be a little better, so call it VFR. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, occasionally marginal VFR, could be some isolated periods of IFR, especially on the eastern approaches of specifically Merrill, not so much Lake Clark. And for rainy, starting out VFR, trending toward marginal, could become IFR at times on the eastern entrance. And for windy, VFR to start, trending down toward IFR. Moisture surges northward with that next big storm. And Isabel, same trend. VFR becomes IFR. Mentasta, IFR becomes marginal VFR. That initial front actually in the afternoon lifts out and conditions will improve later in the afternoon. And for Tanita, VFR becoming marginal throughout the day, and Portage, IFR the entire day. Chilkoot White, same forecast, IFR. Take a look at the freezing levels out in the west, 2,000 feet more or less here for the Aleutians of the Bering Sea. Warming up a little bit to about 4,000 here over the southern Alaska area and then up across into the southeast upper Yukon Valley. And a little milder over the Panhandle, running about 6 to as high as 10,000 feet. Jet stream coming northward initially with a big storm, then it'll shift off to the east tomorrow night and into early Saturday. And for icing, all the moisture coming up, quite a few areas of considerable moderate rime icing above about 6,000 feet right up into the eastern interior here, with conditions starting to become more mixed in nature after that front goes through here, a little more unstable. And so you could probably see mixed icing, but none out to the west, none to the north. And weakening front here could bring a couple areas of isolated moderate rime icing above about 4,000 feet for the Aleutians of the Bering Sea. Jet stream, strong jet across the Pacific, 160 knots, kind of splits right in this area. One branch drops to the south toward Hawaii. This one kind of curves around this low, lifting northward. And initially, the jet will be farther to the west early in the day, but by the afternoon, it'll shift over into the Panhandle at about 120 knots, 9,000 feet. We're looking at strong winds, 40, 50 knots into the eastern North Gulf Coast. Same thing at 3,000 feet, and as far as turbulence goes, quite a bit of moderate chop, isolated thunderstorms in the afternoon with the unstable air, North Gulf Coast, Panhandle, Kodiak Island, Northeast Bristol Bay, and a swath in the central interior.
Monsters in the sky.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm Dean Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory.
And I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Plow Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. It's almost Halloween, so Dean and I thought we'd share our favorite monsters in the sky.
These are the stars and constellations that struck terror in the hearts of our ancestors. And they include a dragon, a sea monster, and a woman with snakes for hair.
And finally, we'll show you the star cluster that signaled the Day of the Dead. Let's show you. We have our skies set for October 31st, facing north at 8:30 p.m. We're going dragon hunting and looking for Draco the Dragon.
There's our guide star halfway up in the north, Polaris, aka the North Star. It's not terribly bright, but you should be able to spy it from most locations. The dragon's sinuous body is nearby.
But the dragon's head holds the brightest stars in this monster constellation. Look for 3 stars in a neat triangle, and if you're in a darker sky, you might be able to make out a 4th star, making it a real blockhead.
Careful, James, don't upset the dragon. The ancient Babylonians referred to Draco as the she-dragon Tiamat, who terrorized creation. She's said to have had a body 7 miles long and a mouth as big as the sky. Along came a god named Marduk, who slew the great beast. Marduk then sliced the dragon in half, one half becoming the earth and the other the heavens above.
Let's look halfway up in the northeastern sky now for the constellation Perseus. He's a toughie to find since the stars don't look like an armor-clad hero with winged sandals.
With a lot of imagination, we can see Perseus holding something in his outstretched arms. To the ancient Greeks, it was the star Algol, aka the winking eye of Medusa.
She's the Gorgon with snakes for hair.
But other cultures had some very frightening names for this star, like the Spectre's Head, Ghost's Head, Satan's Head, the Double Eye, and my personal favorite, Piled Up Corpses.
Why such scary names?
Algol is no ordinary star. It's a special type of star called an eclipsing variable. Algol is really 2 stars that orbit each other. When the bigger, dimmer star blocked the light of the smaller, brighter star, well, the ancients noticed. During these eclipses, Algol dims like clockwork every 2.87 days. So see if you can see the winking eye of Medusa this month. It won't turn you to stone.
Perseus is using Medusa's head to save Princess Andromeda from a briny behemoth, the sea monster Cetus. Look farther to the southeast and maybe you can make out the sea monster.
His outline looks more like a recliner chair.
Nevertheless, this was Poseidon's vicious pet sea monster who we see turned to stone by
Medusa's head!
Algol strikes again.
Many cultures selected November 1st as a special day to honor their dearly departed. It marks a halfway point between fall and winter, plus the coolest star cluster does something special that night, at midnight.
The Seven Sisters, or Pleiades, are an open cluster of stars visible in the east. At first glance, they looked like a little cloud, but upon closer examination, you may be able to make out the individual stars in the cluster.
A sharp-eyed first grader told me they look like a Dinky Dipper.
This Dinky Dipper features heavily in All Hallows' Eve celebrations around the globe, when they are at their highest at midnight. Maya, Aztecs, Peruvians, Japanese, and Hindus all had festivals for the dead near November 1st in honor of the Seven Sisters.
As the night rolls on, the Pleiades rise higher and higher in the sky, and at local midnight they reach their highest point. In fact, from the Yucatan Peninsula, the Seven Sisters would be straight overhead. The great Mayan pyramids would point directly at the cluster.
So, look for Draco the Dragon in the northern sky,
Medusa's head, Algol in the northeast,
Cetus the sea monster in the southeast,
and if you dare, stay up until midnight to see the Seven Sisters ride across a spooky sky.
Have a happy Halloween and
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at today's sea ice analysis, not much change from yesterday at all, virtually unchanged actually in this scale. Still slowly expanding in the eastern Arctic Beaufort Sea coastline to the central area. Some of that getting a little west of Point Barrow due to the persistent northeast winds. This area to the north continuing to expand, and to the west and to the south here. And not much change through the weekend. Now later on Monday, system might pull up off the coast from the south there, and that'd turn the winds here southeasterly with a little bit warmer air, and that might tend to kind of halt any further advance, at least for a little bit there for that ice field. Anyway, onto the coastal water forecast. Gales on the south coast, south-southeast 35 to 40 knots. Storms here in the north, south to southeast 50 to as high as 55 knots. Turning south toward Cape Yakataga, gales with storm force gusts for northern Lynn Canal up to 50 knots. And Stevens Passage, southeast 40 knots, 10-foot seas, 35 gusts 45. I'm sorry, for Clarence Strait, southeast 40 knots, 35 gusts 45 for Stevens Passage. And then on Saturday, much lighter winds here, central and southern inside waters down to 10 to 15 knots, 3 to 5-foot seas. South, 20 knots, 16 to 17-foot seas on the south coast, 18 to 19-foot seas, 25 knots south-southeasterlies on the north coast. Prince William Sound tomorrow, northeast, 35 knots, seas 9 feet. And then we've got 45 to 55 knot winds here from the south-southeast on the eastern North Gulf Coast, north-northeast, 55 knots on the west side, with seas up to 25 feet. Storm force storm warning out for Kamishak Bay, north 50 knots. And full gales here in the forecast for Cook Inlet, north of Forelands, 40 knots, 8-foot seas, 45 knots, southern Cook Inlet with 12-foot seas. And those come down to 15 north of the Forelands on Saturday, southern Cook Inlet about 20 knots, easterlies 30 knots, Kamishak Bay. And for the North Gulf Coast and the Barren Islands, southeast at 30 knots with 11 to 17-foot seas, southeast winds down to 20 for Prince William Sound, but those seas still up to about 6 feet. And for Kodiak Island, west-northwesterlies 45 knots tomorrow and tomorrow afternoon, 11 to 20-foot seas, gales from Sitkinak to Castle Cape out of the west. Alaska Peninsula winds coming down 20 to 25 knots, west 25 for Bristol Bay. And then for Saturday, swinging around to the east at 20 for Bristol Bay, and northwest 15 here on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. Pacific side, north 30 knots, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, northeast 40. Next storm coming up, east 35 there For Kodiak Island and Shelikof Strait, seas 11 to 12 feet. Fox Islands tomorrow, pretty light winds, about 15. That front really weakening as it pushes eastward here. Early on, small craft advisories as the central Aleutians will probably drop under that level in the afternoon. 25 knots south-southeast, seas up to 10 feet. Small craft advisories for the western Aleutians there from Kiska and Amchitka on out to Shemya with seas as high as 17 feet. And then for the next day, north-northwest out that way, 25, seas 12 to 15 feet. 20-knot winds, variable for central Aleutians. Fox Islands, variable winds, 15 knots, seas 4 to 11 feet. Southwest coast, northwest 20, south of Nunivak Island, northeast 20 here, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, as well as St. Matthew Island, northwest 15 for the Pribilofs. And for Saturday, we've got north 15, Norton Sound, northeast 15 here at the southwest coast, 20-knot winds for St. Lawrence and St. Matthew Islands, just southeast 10 for the Pribilofs. Eastern Boulevard Sea Coast, east-northeast 15, all the way to the central coast, 20 knots out of the east on the west side. Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, northeast 25, and then 15-knot winds for the Chukchi Sea. And for Saturday, now we've got 25-knot northeasterlies here from Cape Beaufort all the way down to Wales. No change on the west side of the coast, east-northeast, 20 knots on the west side and about 15 for the central coast. For tonight, big storm coming northward here. Actually late tonight, probably affecting Kodiak Island a little sooner with the front approaching, definitely increasing the wind, rain trending toward heavy at times from Kodiak, North Gulf Coast, even heavier toward the eastern North Gulf Coast area, spreading into the panhandle there with high wind warnings out again for tomorrow from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. from Cape Fairweather to Cape Suckling, gusts to 65 miles an hour until the front pushes through late in the morning, strongest gusts expected, and then things trending down a little bit. Could see some thunderstorms coming in the unstable air behind us. Still quite a gradient here, a lot of moisture out over the Gulf of Alaska yet. Rain and snow in the interior, even lighter snow with fog north slope in the Arctic coast at times. Pretty quiet out along the eastern Bering and southwest coast. Next front weakening as it pushes eastward and actually just drops off to the south on Saturday. Next storm comes up toward Kodiak with wind and rain toward the Kenai Peninsula late in the afternoon.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.